Good afternoon, everybody, and this is Coffee Talks, and we welcome everybody. So what is Coffee Talks? We've been doing this now just for the last few months. We had the opportunity during when we first started this whole pandemic and the lockdown. And Coffee Talks is based on articles we're taking out of the Heartfulness Magazine. So I'm Alka, based in London. I'm a Heartfulness trainer and also work with the Institute, helping with the reports and what can I say? I'm going to pass it on because I can talk.
Thank you, Alka. Hello, everyone. My name is Sharanya, and I am based just a little outside London. And I'm going into my final year at university, studying media and communications. And I've been practicing Heartfulness for just over 6 years now. And I think it's been really helpful for me to ground myself generally and to deal with all the stresses of student life.
Hi everyone, my name is Avani and I just finished my second year of biomedical science at university. I'm also based in London and I've been practicing Heartfulness for around 4.5 years now, and exactly what Sharanya said, just keeping me relaxed, especially in high stressful situations. It's been extremely beneficial.
So may I take this opportunity to welcome our guest, Elizabeth Denley. Elizabeth, please come on board.
Hi everybody, nice to be with you all today.
Lovely.
You want me to talk about myself or we just go straight into the discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm the editor of Heartfulness Magazine. So I'll be sort of talking from the perspective of how the article develops as well. I live in Shantivanam, which is the international headquarters of the Heartfulness movement, just outside of Hyderabad in India. And currently we're in lockdown. The ashram is closed and we're completely isolated in this sort of very peaceful bubble in the countryside where the rainy season's happening and lots of planting of fruit trees and different food items is going on. So I feel very blessed to be here, I must say.
Wow, we can all inspire, hey, to this. Yeah. So today's Coffee Talk, the session, we're talking about creating community. Now, there was an article written by our Daji, also known as Kamleshti Patel, but also known as Daji, and he's our global guide and the founder of this Heartfulness movement. And he talks about this 6th universal principle. I'm sure we all know what's going on recently across the globe and has been for a while. And it covers this topic of brotherhood, so love and mutual respect for each other. So can we have a cup of coffee, everyone, and let's talk about community, please.
Sounds good. So yeah, Alka, I do think that especially the topic of, overcoming prejudice has been in the spotlight so much lately in the media. So I have picked a small extract from the article that will help us to think a little bit more about this topic. So here it is. All things descending from the origin should be treated as coming from the same source. Just as children born of the same mother are related to each other in one and the same way, so also are all bound together by the same common ties of brotherliness, related to each other in the same way.
Sharanya, could you just explain to our viewers two things? Babuji, who is Babuji, and all things descending from the origin. I hope that's okay, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So Babaji was actually the grandmaster of the Heartfulness movement, and the origin to which he refers to was a small point of singularity before the Big Bang happened. So it was essentially a dense ball of energy and mass and everything to have existed. And at one point in time, 14 billion years ago, it expanded. The Big Bang happened, and the universe was created, and the world as we know it, everything around us. So it seems quite simple, that, you know, we all came from that point. But what do you think about that, Elizabeth, in terms of how simple it is, but how do you interpret it?
Well, this takes us into the realm of not only quite interesting quantum physics in the scientific realm, but also the spiritual realm. Because if you look at what physics says, physics talks about matter, energy, and then what they call the vacuum. If you look at what spirituality says, it talks about matter or the physical body of anything, whether it's a human being or the universe or a frog or an amoeba or whatever. There's a physical part, the dimension of matter. There's the dimension of energy, and there's the dimension of what we call the absolute or the origin in spirituality, which is at one point, as you said, infinitesimal, but on the other, it's also infinite. It's what there was before creation. And it's a feminine principle, what there was before creation. It's known as Adi Prakriti in yoga or in the ancient traditions of the Sanskrit language. It's that nothingness out of which energy comes, from which matter forms. And then when it goes back the other way, it goes from matter to energy to absolute. So we're looking at what we call the causal body in yoga, in the science of yoga. We have a physical body, we have a subtle body, which is our energetic body, and we have the causal body, or the nothingness of the soul. So yogic science or spiritual science takes us beyond modern Western science, but there is quite a lot of overlap with this field through quantum physics and quantum theory, that where we're starting to see the bridging of science and spirituality. So if you can imagine the origin as being what was there before creation, it'll help you to understand it. I just want to add one little point, and this is a little bit off topic, but it's important because I've had 4 calls about it this week, all from sisters, all from women who are a little bit disgruntled about the use of the word brotherhood and brotherliness, because they say, what about sisterhood? So I've given them a challenge, and I give it to all of you as well, is to come up with a better word that is gender neutral, that incorporates both men and women, but that has the same sense of meaning that brotherhood does, which is oneness and unity and caring for each other and all the things that we associate with brotherhood. So sorry to take you off track, but if you can do that as some sort of exercise after this call, it would be fantastic, because we haven't come up with the right word yet, and we need to find one.
That's brilliant. I'm already thinking.
Yeah,
Definitely.
me too. And I think we'll have a nice brainstorm after this to come up with another word. But just going off of what Elizabeth has said about the quantum physics and the scientific realm, and I'm gonna talk about the biological point of view after creation. And in the article, Daji says it takes 100 trillion atoms to form a single cell in our body, and there are some 37 trillion cells in the human body, all originating from the same source. If this is true, then why is it that we feel so hopelessly separate?
No, you know, Avani, sorry, you go on about if this is true. Go on, say it.
Did you?
Okay. No, I'm always doing this. So I've been a teacher and speaking to children all the time, and the confusions on their faces really is this whole thing about separation. What is going on in society? Why?
So there's lots of reasons why we're so separate. But I think one thing to focus on from this is that like biologically, and Daji also says this in the article, there is actually hardly any differences between our DNA, and we all started from the same source, just as in terms of the point of singularity, but taking this and applying it to humans and the point of creation, it's the same concept. And but I think this separation is definitely human. It's human made, it's man-made. And we can take an example, for example, racism. No one's born racist. It's something that we learn as we grow and we accumulate all these different ideologies from what we experience, and all these different perspectives that contribute towards this. And so I think that that's what causes all these separations, all the experiences that we go through life. And it's just something that we need to work on and kind of undo in a way, and which will make it easier to have these human connections with each other. That's what I think personally. Elizabeth, do you think there's any other reason?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's our sense of identity that allows us to be separate. What we would call the ego in Western psychology, what we call ahankara in yoga. It's nothing other than feeling that I am a separate being from everybody else, that I have an identity as me. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you look at the biology of it, not only do we have this number of trillion cells, but we actually have more parasites and microbes in our body than cells. So we're not a separate entity, we're an ecosystem, if you look at it from the biological perspective. From the soul level, we're all one. We're not separate. I mean, what makes us separate is only that we have our own sense of identity through the mind, that we think in terms of I instead of we. Otherwise, we're not separate. It's purely a consciousness thing. But the thing is that, you know, I've been reading a lot and looking a lot at what people have been saying during the Black Lives Matter things that have been happening recently in the world, etc. And there's an amazing woman in the US called Robin DiAngelo, who's written a book called White Fragility. And she comes from a very poor background originally, but a white poor background. And she talks about how, even though she had to deal with a lot of prejudice because of her poverty growing up, she still developed prejudice towards blacks in the US, towards Afro-Americans, because of her cultural upbringing. Like you say, it was a learned response. And she talks about how to turn that around. None of these things are fixed. You know, they're all based on our life's experience, our parents' life's experience, our cultures, our schooling, all that sort of stuff. None of it's fixed. But once it becomes hardwired into our neurology, once we accept that somebody of a different color or a different language or a different social stratum or whatever is a threat or different, until we undo that neural hardwiring, we're not going to change it. And of course, it's subconsciously programmed. It's in our subconscious. So it's not that we think it through. We just react from the subconscious through programming, which happens when we're very young. So we actually need techniques to change the patterning. Otherwise, we can want universal peace, we can want love, and we can want all this unity and community, but until we change our patterning, it's not going to change.
I mean, Elizabeth, that brings me on to say, last week I was talking to my other daughter, and she had the opportunity to have an interview with Nelson Mandela's security. There was 12 youth across the globe. Fortunately, she had the opportunity. She asked that question about certain prominent people in society were racist. But how comes they were able to Sharanya, you're on mute.
Hello?
Yeah, did you hear? Does a change happen with us? Or?
Yes. I do think that there are certain processes that we can do. Me, for example, back when I was starting university, I felt very anxious when I was meeting new people. Like, I felt like there was a big barrier in front of me because, you know, I was scared to be vulnerable in front of people, you know, groups of people that I had never interacted with before. So I do think that after kind of like practicing a little bit more, there are ways that I can control and reset myself before the next day starts, so that the kind of anxieties that I take from the day don't go on to the next day, and it can be a fresh slate, and you can essentially have new experiences and take away newer lessons as the day goes on. So I think, yeah, there are things that we can do outside of our, you know, mindset to kind of encourage us to see newer perspectives. But Alka, we spoke about this a little earlier. What do you have to say about that?
So there's few things going on. I mean, you talked about your anxiety, and then we were talking about change. We can talk about our own personal experiences and our practice. And I think before we go on to the heartfulness practice, I mean, is there anything you youth are doing through this unusual, you know, few months that's created you to accept?
I have been doing cleaning a lot more. So that is again part of my meditation practice. But I think outside of that, the book that Elizabeth suggested before, White Fragility, so many people are talking about it. You know, my friends outside of the Heartfulness community, it's just been a whole process around the world of everyone kind of forcing themselves to take in new perspectives and see things as they've not seen before, in the hope of benefiting someone else. So I think it's been an active process for me as well to open myself up to newer perspectives, not only in a spiritual sense, but also in a very physical sense.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I think with the whole current climate, I've definitely seen that there's a lot of change happening, and people are actively taking this opportunity to educate themselves, to educate others, in order to make that change and make it a sustainable change as well. And it's been going on for quite a while now, and it's definitely eye-opening, and it's definitely led me to have all these different perspectives, like Sharanya said, and which is, I think, is really important in today's society.
I mean, Elizabeth, I don't know about you, but I've been having these discussions with my youth children, and this whole, you mentioned the Black Lives Matter, and their perspective is very sharp and clear to the way I see things, possibly because growing up in the UK and the surroundings, we saw quite a lot of disruption, disturbance. Now the youth are seeing it from such another viewpoint. What do you feel, Elizabeth, or what do you hear as you have more sort of a wider global reach out?
Yeah, I think it's an evolution that's been going on, obviously, for, you know, since time immemorial. Our collective consciousness is always evolving, or it should be always evolving. And if you compare things now with how they were, say, at the beginning of the 20th century or in the 19th century, when, for example, women in European culture were basically they were wives and mothers, or effectively they were prostitutes. You know, there was very little else that a woman could do in that society. And so the women's movements of those times were dealing with very basic stuff, like how women could get decent health care in either of those circumstances, and how they could get the right to vote and all that sort of stuff. So when you compare that to now, or you compare the sort of slavery that was going on back then with Afro-Americans who were taken to various parts of the world, not only to the US, but also in Europe and elsewhere, it was accepted that slavery was normal back then. Of course, now I'm not saying that things are necessarily all that better for a lot of people today, but certainly the awareness has shifted. And I think we're going through another quantum leap of consciousness evolution in all this, to where people are saying it's not okay now to have these prejudices. These prejudices have to be dealt with head on, and people are talking about them in many different ways. The way I look at it is that every single human being on this planet, every soul that has incarnated as a human being, is one part of the jigsaw puzzle. Every individual has their own genius, whatever that may be. And of course, our job as parents, as teachers, is to help nurture young people to find that genius. And we haven't been very good at that to date. So I think at the end of the day, also cultures, every culture has something to bring. Now, if you were to look at a garden and see different plants, some of them trees, some of them small, some of them with flowers, some of them not, some of them edible, some of them just for birds, etc. You know, we can look at something like that and look at what a master gardener does with that and be very happy about the diversity. So why aren't we happy about the diversity in human beings? Because when you explore it in the way of what does this culture, what does this person bring to the table? What is it that they've developed so beautifully? And then you look at another culture and another group of people and say, what is their contribution to the human race? And you keep doing that with everybody, it becomes very, very clear that we all have a part to play. And if we're stupid enough to think that one group is better than another, then we miss out on this incredible opportunity to see what we call unity and diversity in a spiritual context. One of the main, we're looking at principle 6 here today, but principle 9 is this idea of molding our living so that we evoke love in other people. And how do we do that? When you read Babaji's commentary, he's saying it's by appreciating and valuing the genius of diversity, if you like. What does everybody bring to the table? And how do we integrate that? How do we see different perspectives in the way of an enrichment rather than a competition or a threat? I think we've still got a long way to go with that, but we're heading in the right direction. And the discussions that are happening now around this, which impact this principle 6 incredibly, because what is principle 6? It's know everybody as your brothers and sisters and treat them as such, right? And I'm sure all of you who've had brothers and sisters growing up, you fight with your brothers and sisters as well as loving them. But does it stop you loving them when you fight with your brother or sister? Not at all. 10 minutes later, you're off playing again, having fun. And so how do we get to that perspective with each other where we have differences and it doesn't matter because we love each other?
Well, do you know, that brings on to the next part of the article, Elizabeth, where this is the one I pulled out. So I'm not sure, we wanted to surprise you, and three of us got together and said, pick parts that we resonate with, and the girls did the other two. And this one for me is, we cannot have the true compassion unless we have, first of all, compassion for ourselves, and nor can we love others unless we love ourselves. But, I keep sitting here and I go, but we know this, but how? And I went on to sort of think about this, and if we don't learn from one another, I think, like what you said, that's such an opportunity missed. I know, you know, it's good to help each other, but I think more importantly, you know, it's okay to be helped. You know, that for me is something I'm going to try to work on, because I'm so, coming from a business world, businesswoman, to now becoming a teacher, and watching these children, knowing they're more evolved than me, when you sit back and you watch what's going on, it's amazing. So is it my old age, as I'm aging, that I want to be helped? Or maybe I should say to everybody, learn that from now. It's okay to be helped. And the other thought I had, sorry, I know I talk a lot, sorry, is that we grow, you know, we need to be fully engaged with each other. I mean, what does that look like? Listening. I think that's one of the biggest things that we don't do. We think we're always right, or we think we are listening. And so that's one big thing I'm trying to work for myself. I'm just sharing. And last of all, to create these healthy relationships. It's always going to, for me, boil down to that mutual respect and love. So my question to you all is, how do we create that? I'm just going to open that up. We all got thoughts. Come on, bring it on. How do we create that?
I actually had a thought while you were talking about this, Alka, and it's quite relevant also to, you know, everything that we've been seeing lately, but also having a lot of kindness and compassion to someone who has a different opinion to you, because at the end of the day, the world, you know, we've been talking about how similar we are, but we have very minute level differences between us, and sometimes they seem like the world to us. But as Elizabeth said, to just, you know, show someone so much love that even when you disagree, you try your best to be as respectful as you can, and, you know, treat them in a very cliche way, treat them as you would like to be treated, with that mutual respect and with that kindness. And because I'm not sure about if it's just me, but I do believe that real change never comes when we force things upon other people. It comes when we, you know, invoke a change in them. And I think that only comes through love and very softer means.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that we can do this is also by understanding each other. And we can understand each other, especially the differences between cultures and ethnicities, is by education. I think education is really important in today's society, because through this education, you're then able to gain all these different perspectives and opinions, and use this in, like, utilize this in a way to have that mutual respect and mutual love, because you're able to then understand each other even more. And I think, but the thing is, Sharanya, when you're talking about treating someone how you want to be treated, I think there's also some kind of not controversy, but like some kind of I don't know what the word is, but a fine line between having that self-respect and then also having compassion for others, because you want to be mutual, of course, but then where is that balance between having self-respect and also compassion when treating someone else? And that's a question that I kind of pose to you guys.
Can I add something there, Avani? It's all well and good to talk theoretically about being loving, kind, and compassionate, but what gets in the way here is really at the base of what makes us human, which is our emotions. So anybody who's been on the end of prejudice because of skin color, because of educational level, because of poverty, because of whatever, knows what it feels like to be hurt because of how other people treat you. In fact, all of us know what it's like to be hurt by somebody else, because We've all had that experience, and it's not pleasant. So the question is not just being kind, it's how to get out of the dynamics that we've set ourselves in to date. You know, we have it in Australia with the Aboriginal culture. You know, the government a few years ago said sorry for the way they treated the Aboriginal people when the Europeans first landed and basically massacred them and, you know, put smallpox into their communities and all sorts of things. But in a sense, that's not enough. It's not enough just to feel kindness and compassion. There has to be some practical way forward to, I'm not expressing this very well, but for example, you take the case of Australia where you've had, not only have people been oppressed and really treated, they weren't even treated as human beings up until 1967. They were considered as part of the fauna and flora of Australia and not allowed the right to vote. And so you expect people who've been in that situation, who've had their languages lost, who've come through generations of oppression, generations of building up resentment, etc., to suddenly let go of that just because somebody's kind and compassionate to them. I don't think it's going to work because there's too much water under the bridge. I think we have to really look at the sort of practical tools that help us together to get rid of those past patternings, because without that, nothing can change. Until I can change my subconscious programming so that I no longer have to carry the hurt of my culture or the hurt of my sex or my race or whatever it is, there's going to be a subconscious part of me that will still feel that and will react every time I'm faced with that situation. So I think without the practical tools, we won't get anywhere. I think that's, for me, is why Heartfulness is so important here, because until you're cleaning out past prejudices, until you're letting go and acknowledging your own part in what's happened and saying, look, from the bottom of my heart, I'm truly sorry for this, then I don't see it changing.
So that brings on to me to say, because that's what I was thinking when Daji did that wonderful talk, leading from the heart, especially leaders. I was talking to, again, my other daughter who is quite political in her views. And I said, so, you know, there's that, people keep saying change has to happen from the top. I don't know, guys. We keep saying this, but is that gonna work? Elizabeth, you talk about practical. Are we talking about things like income, housing, you know, NHS, you know, health availability, or, you know, like you said, there was a lot of hurt, and it's being passed on through generations. How do we clean that? Sorry, I'm just thinking aloud. How do we clean that? Is it society? Is it individually? Sorry, I'm saying so much. You know, I sit here trying to work this out, which I know I can't, but at least we're talking about it.
For me, and my personal experience is that it's at an individual level. And as this individual level becomes a grassroots movement and we become contagious in our willingness to change, it'll happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so, so I agree with what Elizabeth said, how it comes from an individual level, personal change. And that will, I think that if that happens, then that can lead to systemic changes, and changes from the top can then happen, because then if your personal views have changed as a politician or as a person in power, and you have that kind of mindset and that mindset, then you're able to then enforce that into like politics and law in order to have that systemic change.
Absolutely. But talking of this, I also had another question that came up. What happens when, for example, you know, you have individual change and you're growing as a person, but the society you're in is not growing at the same pace, and we so often tend to rub energies and rub kind of feelings off and react off one another. How do we stop the flow and simply, you know, retain our positive change?
It's a very good question, dear.
Yeah.
So, does anyone else want to speak? I'm happy to answer, but you know.
I'll start it off, Elizabeth, and I'm sure
Okay.
you're going to on this. Let me reiterate that question so I understand. Are you saying that if your condition is at a certain point, it's not even a point, and you then go out into society and people around you are not, how do you retain that condition? Is that what you're saying? And this is something through the practice of heartfulness is, from my understanding, is that we call it constant remembrance and being in that state of being connected from within. It's all to do with our own practice and making it more solid. That's from my understanding. Elizabeth?
So, say you're a mother or a father with your children, or even an older brother or sister or a teacher. Do you expect the people younger than you in the family or in the class to be the same as you? No, you don't, do you? You know, all of us as human beings are at different levels in many ways, and this is the whole thing about accepting people as they are. That in some ways I may be much more evolved than somebody else, and in other ways they may be much more evolved than me. Because I'm looking from my own perspective, I see myself as in some way superior or more enlightened or whatever, and they may be looking at me seeing just the opposite. This is the whole thing Alka mentioned before about listening. How do we communicate with each other? How do we view each other? How do we, you know, the previous guide to the one we have now in this system, Charity, once said something amazing about teachers. He said a teacher's job is to love the students and to find the genius in every student. So how do you find the genius in another human being so that you're not focused on where they're in some way less advanced or less evolved than yourself? It's a mindset, it's a consciousness shift. It means that I'm not looking at them anymore within my framework. I've got rid of that framework to the extent where I can look outside and go, you know what? Here's another human being. What are they going to teach me today? What do I have to learn from this fellow soul? It doesn't matter if I'm in my 60s and they're 5 years old. There's still something there, because the soul has nothing to do with how old we are. We're all on this, you know, consistently recycling set of lifespans, all interacting with each other. So I think it's, and for me, this is what meditation does. It gets rid of all that stuff so that I can be like a small baby is, just this sense of wonder. What does the world have to show me today? What does this person have to show me? I think if that's the attitude, then, you know, you can learn from an ant, you can learn from a frog, you can learn from anything, anybody in the universe.
That sounds amazing. Very inspiring.
Can you two, for our audience, you understand the system that the heartfulness practice, and because I know we don't have long now, and I would like Elizabeth to share with us what's coming up. But before Elizabeth does that, girls, could you share, taking what Elizabeth said, you know, have you, when you do part of the practice, have you experienced anything? Would you like to say anything?
I think I think for me, even before I started, so I had this mindset before I started Heartfulness and meditation that I wasn't really kind of sure about the meditation, and I was very like scientific based, like how can you experience things? Surely it's all about experiments and having like practicalities, because you can't see it, you can't see what's happening when you're meditating. But I think definitely once I've started the Heartfulness and the meditation, is definitely shown me this whole new side of life, I guess. And like Elizabeth said, I've been able to open up more to different like ideologies and different people. Like it's maybe more open towards receiving from other people, I guess. Especially when I've gone to university and I've met all these new different people with all these different backgrounds and they come from different walks of life. Especially you see all the international students that come, and you interact with them and you see that their upbringing. It's definitely made me more receptive to this meditating, and I've been able to keep such an open mind and again learn from them, as Elizabeth said, which I don't think I would have been able to do if I didn't meditate, essentially, or it would have taken me longer to get to that point, I guess, for me.
Do you feel, Avani, this is going to help you long term, maybe in your career?
Yes, definitely, especially because the career that I want to do, I'm going to interact with so many different people, such a diverse amount of people, and it would definitely allow me to interact with these people and build these like connections with people as a doctor, essentially.
But then, yeah, also it's that whole judging business, isn't it? So you've got to treat each one equally, right? Going back to brotherhood.
I don't think, I mean, equally, yes, like there should be, but I think it's more about having no discriminations, because everyone comes from different backgrounds. So treating everyone equally, you're not taking into account their backgrounds or their beliefs or their religion, for example. It's more about having no prejudices, and again being open-minded to everyone.
Okay, Sharanya?
Absolutely. I mean, like Avani said, you know, when she started out meditating, it's really hard to know the depths of what you can achieve and where you can go. And I think when I started off, I was very very cautious about, you know, like I didn't really think that it was going to change me so much. And I had a pretty set idea of, you know, that this is what people do when they meditate, and I guess these are the kind of people who meditate, and this is what they become. But I think the more I started experiencing it myself, I started realizing that there is honestly no label to what you experience, and it's a very individual experience. And you know, I've seen people meditate when they're, you know, in their like later years in life, or I've seen young people meditate, and it all changes them in beautiful ways. And it generally, in my experience, has allowed me to be more accepting of situations in life and simply live in the present moment, and just see what comes my way. I'm not sure who said this. I can't remember the person, but someone said that, you know, living in the present is almost like allowing yourself to be like water, just simply allowing yourself to go where the flow takes you. And I think meditation has really, really helped, which I didn't even think was possible for me. I just simply had a set personality, and I felt like that was me, and you know, that's not going to change. And once I started meditating, I didn't even expect that change, and it just happened in me. So it took me to areas that I didn't think I would go.
Lovely. Sorry, we can talk for hours. I need another cup of coffee. I finished that one. Elizabeth, can you enlighten us with the next months, please?
Yes. So
Yes.
August is going, the theme is on personal transformation. But Daji's article is on the art of gratitude, on the 7th principle of these maxims. And so it's another amazing one, which gives a lot of insight in how to deal with difficulties and challenges and the sort of things that block us from having unity. So it's the next step after this one, if you like. And it's really, it's a fabulous article. There's the last installment of Bruce Lipton. There's some amazing articles again. We hear from some younger authors as well. I think you'll find it very inspiring, and you know, things are progressing with this series of Daji because each principle builds on the previous ones, and we're now moving into how to deal with miseries, how to be grateful under all circumstances, which is pretty relevant for COVID times as well, given what everybody's going through with job losses and all sorts of crazy social changes. And then after that, in September, we move into celebrating food, which will be, and also Peace Day, because so a much more joyous edition. But I think there's a lot of good content coming up, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
So just for our new viewers, yes, for our new viewers, the Heartfulness Magazine is online.
Yes.
It's available to all. It's free, but it's amazing. It's not something you could just read on your own. Share with your friends, family, colleagues, over a coffee maybe. But before we leave, would anybody like to add anything before we close up? No? I think there's a lot.
To thank everyone thank Elizabeth especially for joining us today. It's been really, I've really enjoyed the discussion we've had today.
Me too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been so nice just hearing your perspective and your take on things. It's just really, it's always refreshing. So thank you.
Yeah, lovely to interact with you guys too. I hope we can do it more.
We will. So Coffee Talk, again, for our viewers, we'll be doing this again next month. So watch that space. In the meantime, have a good month. Get online, get the magazine. The parts we've taken out is not, there's more to it. So please enjoy and have a good day. Bye-bye.